So the question is that I've heard from Bhagavan that grace is earned. That's the question.
No, no. Grace is not earned. If it's something that could be earned, if what is earned is the fruit of an action. If grace were a karma pala, the fruit of an action, it would be finite. But grace is infinite. So how can grace be earned? Of course, in a certain sense, that is, grace is our own real nature, but we can explain what is meant by grace being earned. There are a couple of analogies that were given by Ramakrishna Paramahamsa. One is that grace is always showering like the monsoon rain. It's constantly tipping down. Grace is, there's no time or place where grace is not abundantly available. But just as the rain, if it falls on a mound, it runs off the mound. But where it accumulates are in the low-lying places. So if there's anything we can do to earn, in inverted commas, grace, the only thing we can do is to subside. In other words, cease doing, just being. That's the only way to earn that. But in order to subside, it is only by grace that we subside. So the grace is ever available, but we need to yield ourselves to that grace. Or the other analogy that Ramakrishna Paramahamsa gave is the wind is always blowing. But in order for a boat to be benefited by the wind, it has the boatman has to open the sail. So we must open our sail. We must open our heart. We must yearn for that grace, pray for that grace, long for that grace, be ready to receive that grace, be ready to subside. But ultimately, the analogy I like most of all is that analogy he gave of the rain falling on a mound or falling in a pit. Only in the pit will it accumulate. So if we want to do anything to earn grace, not that grace is really something that can be earned, if we want to do anything, it is to subside back within. And subsiding, of course, isn't a doing, it is a cessation of all doing. And how do we subside? By trying our best to turn within, to fix our attention on ourselves. In Guru Vasaka Kovai, there's several verses about grace in which Bhagavan emphasizes that grace is what is always shining in our heart as I. And in one verse he says, I'm paraphrasing, this isn't exactly, is put in a much more compact way, but the implication is people complain that God isn't gracious. That is, if we don't get what we want, we say, oh, God is not gracious to me. Or if we have to face some difficulty in life, oh, God is not being gracious to me. Bhagavan says the accusation that God is ungracious is always a false accusation, because God's very nature is grace. He's abundantly graceful. But the grace that is lacking is our grace. That is, he is abundantly gracious to us by shining in our heart as our very own self, as our nearest and dearest. But we are ungracious to him because instead of lovingly attending to him in our heart, we are constantly rushing out to seeking happiness in the things of the world. So we are lacking, we are the ones who are ungracious, not he is ungracious. In his own homely way, Ramakrishna Paramahamsa put it beautifully. The grace of three are necessary. We need the grace of God, the grace of Guru, and the grace of Jiva. We need to be willing to offer ourselves completely. So God and Guru, of course, are one and the same. Their grace is ever present. It's our grace that is lacking. as Sadhuam, a very, very deep idea that Sadhuam expresses in the Path of Sri Ramana, is attention itself is grace. Because when we attend to things, if we are preoccupied with a certain thing, so supposing we are preoccupied with politics, the things that are happening in the world, the more we dwell on these things, the more these things loom large in our mind. So whatever we attend to, that thing grows, so to speak, in terms of our experience. It becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. So whatever we attend to most, those are the things that seem most important to us. So rather than bestowing our grace on anything other than ourselves, we should bestow our grace on ourselves by attending to ourselves alone. The more we attend to ourselves, the more satisfaction we will find in just subsiding, subsiding, subsiding. The more we attend to things other than ourselves, the more we will be dissatisfied, because nothing other than ourselves can satisfy us. Attention is the power of awareness, Chit Shakti. So that Chit Shakti is what has created all this, and it is also what will destroy all this. When we look outwards, we create all this. When we look inwards, we resolve it all back into its source. When we subside back within, everything else subsides along with us. As Bhagavan says in verse 26 of Uludunaptu, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. Therefore, investigating what this ego is giving up everything. Because to the extent to which we investigate ourselves, to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, we thereby subside. And when we subside, everything else subsides along with us. Because everything else seems to exist only in our view. So when we subside, everything else subsides. So we have this great Chit Shakti. We have to use this by being gracious to our own being, attending to our own being, instead of being gracious to all these illusory phenomena that appear when we look outwards.